Hello, friends. I'm excited to read through chapter 12 with you today. Today, as we read through chapter 12, we're going to be learning a little bit more about how the characters in the book, Ben, and maybe even some other characters in the story, are trying to see if they can figure out some kind of way to save the land that Mrs. Tibbetts lives on, see if they can find a way to save that land so that the Spadefoot toads don't lose their habitat and are still able to live there. So we're going to read to find out what happens in chapter 12. Are you ready to read? After school on Monday, Ben sits at home in front of the computer. The notes for his geography report are scattered all over his desk. Printouts about the Sonoran deserts, pictures of the saguaro cactuses with mountains in the distance, maps of southern Arizona. So, why can't he start writing his report? Thinking about the desert makes him think about lizards. And thinking about lizards makes him think about Lenny. And thinking about Lenny makes him think about Toby. He rummages through the pictures of the desert and stops at one he'd almost forgotten. The heading says, Couch's Spadefoot. It looks a lot like Mrs. Tibbetts' Spadefoot's, except it has yellowish spots all over its back instead of two stripes. Weird that there are Spadefoots in the desert too, he thinks. He reads the text under the drawing. There's no mention of it being endangered or threatened. I guess the Spadefoots haven't lost as much of their habitat down there, Ben says to himself. He wonders why Mrs. Tibbetts isn't making more of an effort to stop the land being sold. The adult world is like a big wall, Ben thinks. You can't see through it. You can't go over it. How is a kid supposed to understand what they're doing on the other side? He types Massachusetts Spadefoot vernal pools into the computer and looks at the search page. More than 800 listings come up. Some of them look pretty technical, but he clicks on about a dozen of them. And each time he sees the word Spadefoot, his heart leaps. This is his word. These are his Spadefoots. He finds a page for kids that teaches about Spadefoots and salamanders and vernal pools. He prints out a color photograph of an eastern Spadefoot. But none of this is what he's looking for. Then he comes across a reference to the Massachusetts Fisheries and Wildlife Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. It's an article about saving vernal pools, and he tries to read through it, but it's too full of scientific details and difficult words. He's about to try another listing when he spots something halfway down the last page. It's a space to send questions or comments. Ben stares at it for a minute. Then he types, I need your help. There's a vernal pool with Spadefoots in it near my house, and the land is being sold, but there's no place for the toads to go. How can I save them? He puts his name in the little box at the bottom and then adds his phone number. He doesn't believe that anyone will answer him. He's just a kid. But so what, he thinks. They won't know this is from a kid. Just as he hits send, his mother comes into the room. What are you doing? Nothing. I'm trying to find out about vernal pools. What are they? They're places that toads live, like on Mrs. Tibbetts' land. Ben, shouldn't you be finishing your desert report? I know. You take care of your homework, all right? Let Mrs. Tibbetts take care of her toads. Ben looks back at his computer screen, and she finally leaves. He glances over at the printer and pulls out the sheet of paper. The Spadefoot in the photograph stares at him. He can almost hear it calling. Here it is, Ben says, showing the picture in the book to Ryan and Jenny. Here's a Spadefoot. Ryan bends the page over for a closer look. It's just a regular looking toad. It's kind of cute though, Jenny says, in a toad-like kind of way. I know they look regular, but there are hardly any left around here. Ben closes the book. It was really cool to see them. There were all these toads in the pond swimming around, and they were all calling out, and Mrs. Tibbetts and I were laughing about the overtoad. The overtoad? Ryan blurts out. What's that? A huge toad with superpowers that looks after all the Spadefoots. Is there really a big toad like that? Ryan asks, hopping back and forth from one foot to the other. No, you dummy, Jenny says. It's just a story. Yeah, but it sounded like there was. I wish it was, said Ben. We could use the overtoad, even here at school. He hands the book back to Ryan. It's almost time for school to start. Here, he says. You can take it back. Thanks. It was cool to look at. Did you see the blue poison dart frog? Ryan asks. His eye that's not covered is dancing with excitement, as jumpy as the rest of him. Yeah, I did. And the one that looks like a leaf? Yeah. And the one that has circles on its rear end that look like big eyes? Yeah, says Ben. Like two cross eyes. They were so funny. And he crosses his eyes to look crazy. And then suddenly, a shadow of hurt passes over Ryan's face. Jenny gives Ben a look, letting him know he's made a big mistake. Thanks for giving the book back, Ryan says, and turns away. Oh, Ryan, I wasn't making fun of you. I can't help it about my eye, Ryan says angrily. I can't help it. Come on, Ryan. I don't care about your eye. I didn't. I know you don't care, Ryan muttered. I meant everyone to your seats, says Mrs. Kutcher, rapping on her desk with a pencil. Time to get started. Jenny sits down and turns to look at Ben. I know you didn't mean it. Ben rolls his eyes. I'm an idiot. No, she says, you're not an idiot. You are a little weird sometimes, but being weird is much better than being an idiot. Ben shrugs. Yeah, but what if you're an idiot who's weird too? Now that's a problem, Jenny says. You might as well give up right now. Nothing worse than a weird idiot. I know, Ben nods. I know. Ben watches Ryan all through the morning, but Ryan avoids his gaze. And at lunch, Ben sits next to him, hoping to get him to smile. But Ryan just keeps his head down and doesn't say a word. And after a few minutes, Frankie plops down across from them and promptly starts stealing French fries off of the other kids' plates. He stuffs the French fries into his mouth, seeing how many he can get in at once. The boys around him guffaw. If it wasn't Frankie's way of showing off, Ben thinks, it might actually be funny. But even Frankie's French fry-packed mouth doesn't make Ryan smile. And when Frankie sees that neither Ryan nor Ben is laughing, he opens his mouth so that everyone can see the matched up French fries. And a few soggy bits spill out onto the table. Dennis DeMio, Danny Martin, and Tommy Miller are all laughing their heads off. Frankie chews and swallows the huge lump of mushy potatoes. And then he looks at Ben and Ryan. Ben can see he's trying to think of something to say. What's wrong with you, Captain Kidd? Frankie finally says to Ryan. Lay off him, Ben says. Oh, excuse me, Frankie sneers. He glances at the other boys for support. I didn't know you were Captain Kidd's bodyguard. Why don't you go chase frogs or something with Mrs. Ribbits? Everyone at the table looks at Ben, waiting to see what he'll say. Frankie keeps going. Mrs. Tibbetts, Mrs. Ribbits, Ribbits, Tibbetts, Ribbits, Tibbetts. He starts making frog noises. Kids are laughing again. Shut up, Frankie, Jenny shouts from the other end of the table. What do you care? She's nothing but a dumb old science teacher. Ben can't stand it anymore. She's not dumb. She knows a lot of things. Yeah, she knows she's the worst teacher in the school. She's smart, Ben says, knowing he's letting Frankie get to him. She's cool. Now even Ryan is looking at him like he's lost it. Who would ever call an old science teacher cool? But Ben just can't stop himself. You should see her yard and the woods on her property, and she's got all sorts of cool things around her house. What? Frankie jeers. Like lots of fries for frogs to eat. No, stupid animals like snakes, rattlesnakes. I've even seen them. Right. Frankie rolls his eyes. Rattlesnakes? Fat chance. What kind of old woman has rattlesnakes? Everyone at the table has stopped talking. All eyes are on Ben. He takes a quick look at Jenny. Her eyes are open wide. She can't believe what she's hearing. He wishes that he hadn't said anything, but he can't back down now. It's true. She hid 2 of them in a cage, and she showed them to me. This isn't exactly what happened, but he's sick of Frankie making fun of everything everybody says, and he wants to prove how great Mrs. Tibbetts is and how real the rattlesnakes are. Liar, says Frankie. I am not. Liar, Frankie snarls again. The word hits Ben hard. He stands up. I swear it's true. And suddenly, Ryan stands up too. It's true. He told me he saw them. Ben is stunned. He's never said anything to Ryan about the rattlesnakes. And he looks over, trying to figure out what's going on, but Ryan is staring hard at Frankie through his crazy glasses, and Frankie's mouth opens like he's going to say something, but then he shuts it. Really? Danny asks. Yes, really, Ben says. Danny looks convinced. And she let me see them, Ben insists. But they got away and now they're out on her property. He has no idea where the snakes are now. Mrs. Tibbetts hadn't expected them to survive, but maybe they would. Maybe they're still alive. No way, Frankie said, but this time his heart isn't in it. And he looks around for support, but everyone's listening to Ben now. Uh-huh, it's true, Ryan is shouting. It's true. Oh, who cares about Mrs. Ribbits, Frankie says. He makes a face like all of this is stupid, and he doesn't care. Not only that, Ryan goes on, the overtoad will eat you up if you don't believe it. No one except for Ben and Jenny has got any idea what Ryan is talking about. And Jenny starts to laugh. And Ben has to laugh too when he sees the bewildered look on Frankie's face. Frankie stares down at his plate. For once, he can't think of a thing to say. Ben looks at Ryan, and Ryan gives him a huge smile. And when they head back to class, Ben catches up with Ryan and whispers in a dark, sinister voice, "Better look out for the overtoad." "Overtoad, overtoad," Ryan chants. "Better look out for the overtoad." Ben slips on his jacket and opens the back door. "Where are you headed?" his mother asks. "Just to walk out back," he says. "I want to come too," Agatha says. "Sorry," Ben says. "I need to go alone." "Mom," Agatha whines, "tell Ben to let me go with him." Mrs. Maroney narrows her eyes and studies Ben's face. "Let your brother go by himself this time," she says to Agatha. "Anyway, you have some work to do in your room." "But, Mom—" "You heard what I said, Agatha. And Ben, keep an eye on the time." Ben remembers all the time that she said that as he went out the garage door in Tucson, headed into the dry riverbed. He's not in Tucson anymore. But just for a moment, it feels the same. The sun is shining, and in a minute, Ben takes off his jacket and ties it around his waist. He walks along the trail through the marshy place he's come to know, stopping now and then to look at something that's just sprouting or to listen for new sounds. Tiny leaves the size of cat's ears are opening on some of the maple trees. He turns over a log and finds a salamander, shiny black with bright yellow spots on its back. And very carefully, he picks it up and holds it in his hand, and then he puts it down beside the log. "You stay there," he says. He whistles to himself as he follows the trail toward Mrs. Tibbetts' land. He pulls a folded sheet of paper out of his pocket. An official at the National Heritage Program actually answered his email. He opens the printout and reads it again. "Thank you for your query," it says. "A member of our staff will give it careful attention and will get back to you as soon as possible." Ben smiles and puts the paper back in his pocket. The trail widens a little, and the new leaves overhead make little shadows on the ground. He's almost to the vernal pool when he hears men talking. He stops and peers through the trees. The men are wearing orange construction helmets, and they're carrying instruments on long tripods. And someone has tied orange plastic ribbons on a couple of tree trunks. And in the distance, Ben can see a truck, and he cuts toward it, stepping over fallen logs and wading through the wet leaves. And as he gets closer to the truck, the woods thin out, and he comes into an open space. The street that runs in front of Mrs. Tibbetts' house is not far away, and big white plastic tubes stick out of the ground in 3 or 4 places. Ben feels his hands sweaty. He walks up to one of the men standing by the truck. "What are you doing?" Ben asks. "Surveying," the man answers. "It looks like they're planning to put up some houses here. We're measuring the lots." "What are the plastic tubes for?" Ben asks. "They're for something called a perk test," the man explains. "To make sure that water can filter down into the soil. They can only build where the soil can be drained properly." Ben's heart leaps with hope. "Well, what if the soil can't drain? Can they still build?" "Oh, no, don't worry about that. This land is too valuable. They'll find plenty of space for the houses. About a dozen of them." "A dozen houses?" "Yep." The man opens the door of the trunk and takes out a thermos. Ben turns away and retraces his steps back to the woods. He runs down the path and stops at the vernal pool. He can't believe it. It's half the size it was that rainy night a week and a half ago. The edges of the pool are still muddy layered with caked black leaves, but it's drying up fast, like a puddle on a sidewalk after a rainstorm. Ben squishes over to the murky edge and squats down. The water is murky, but he sits there for a minute, watching and waiting. And then he sees them. At first, he only makes out 1 or 2 darker shapes in the water, but then more come into focus. Dozens of tadpoles scurry around in the water, pumping with their hind legs, their little tails wagging behind them. Spadefoot toads! Hundreds of them! Ben takes off toward Mrs. Tibbetts' house, and when he sees her car in the driveway, he sprints around to the back door of the house and looks through the window on the back door. Mrs. Tibbetts is at the kitchen sink. He knocks, and when she turns around and sees him, her face breaks into a smile. "Why, hello, Ben," she says as she opens the door. "What a nice surprise. Come on in. I think I can find a little something for us to snack on." Ben takes off his muddy shoes and steps inside the kitchen. He's not hungry. His mind is filled with what he just saw and what it means. "Mrs. Tibbetts, I saw the Spadefoot tadpoles. There are lots of them." "Oh, I know," she says. "They're growing very quickly. They won't be in the pool much longer, another 2 weeks or so. And there are people out there measuring the land. They put these tubes to see if they can build houses." "I know. I saw them when they came home." But aren't you going to do something?" Ben is pacing around the kitchen, unable to be still. How can she stand there so calmly, he wonders. "It's going to be all right," she says. "But what do you mean? The toads are going to be okay?" Mrs. Tibbetts hesitates for a minute before speaking. "Ben, I don't expect you to understand, but I explained the problem. My sister-in-law owns the land. She's going to sell it, and the more I say about it, the worse it gets. I don't think that we can prove the land is an endangered habitat anyway." "But it is! We know it is! We have to try!" Mrs. Tibbetts has a pained look on her face. "I'm so sorry, Ben." "Did you even call the people at the state?" Ben says. "I sent them an email." Mrs. Tibbetts' eyes grow wide. "You did?" "Yes, and I got an answer today. Look!" He pulls out the piece of paper and shows it her. "Well," says Mrs. Tibbetts, "if Tabitha gets wind of this, she'll scream bloody murder." "It wasn't you. I did it." Mrs. Tibbetts sighs. "Ben, it was very nice of you to try, but this is just a form letter. They probably send these notes to everyone who writes in. But they say they'll get back to me as soon as possible." "I know you want to help, but I'm afraid there's nothing anyone can do now. And even if they did respond, by the time they came out here, the pond may have dried up." "Well, you should have called them," he mutters as he turns to leave. "Maybe, maybe not. Everything will work out," Mrs. Tibbetts calls to him. "You'll see." Ben looks back at Mrs. Tibbetts. He can tell by her face that she doesn't believe what she's saying. She's given up. "Forget it," Ben says over his shoulder. He pulls his shoes on and stomps out the door and around the garage. And as he rounds the corner near the garden, something makes him look back. The empty cage is still sitting under the lean-to. He pauses for a moment and then runs back and pounds on Mrs. Tibbetts' door. She pulls it open and looks at Ben in alarm. "What's wrong?" she asks. "What about the timber rattlers? Maybe they're not still out there. Wouldn't they be endangered if they're living there?" Mrs. Tibbetts shakes her head. "They're not there, Ben." "But you're not sure." "They could be. Maybe they survived and they found a place to live around here. Then we'd have to let them be. She shakes her head again. I'm sure they're gone. Ben knows she means they're dead, but neither of them can say the word dead, gone. I have to go, Ben says, and he turns toward the door. All right, Ben. Thanks for coming by. I'll see you in school. Ben nods, but he doesn't look at her. He opens the door and leaves the house. He steals a glance behind him as he rounds the corner of the garage. Mrs. Tibbetts is standing in the doorway, watches him leave. She waves. Ben heads down the path toward home. The sun is hot on his face, and he hears chickadees over his head as he passes into the woods. A blue jay brays out overhead, warning everything around that Ben is coming through. Little green shoots are coming up along the path. How can it be so beautiful on such a rotten day? All right. Seems like there's no hope. Ben sends an email and he gets a response that someone is going to look into the situation. But after talking with Mrs. Tibbetts, it seems like there's no hope. Even if someone does come out and look to see if there are spadefoots or if that land has endangered animals that live in it, it would take weeks and weeks. And there's already trucks there that are surveying the land and measuring and planning and preparing for building these houses. I don't know if there is enough time to save the Spadefoot. So we'll have to read some more next time to find out what Ben decides to do next. Bye.